Okay, we are here. We have a quorum. Welcome, everybody, to CB2's January Executive Committee meeting. I'm Susan Kent, Chair of CB2. We do have a quorum, so we're going to get started. I hope you all have our agenda. The first item, we have to approve both the November and December committee minutes. Last month when we didn't have a quorum at the time, so we have to vote on both of those. Does anybody have any changes, questions, issues with first November? No, okay. Anybody have anything with regards to December?
Not I.
Okay, if there's a problem? If there's no objection, I will take a motion to approve both sets of minutes. So, and a second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, chair's report quickly. Just wish everybody, first of all, it's great to see you on this freezing night. Thank you so much. Happy New Year. It's the start of a year, so it is time to start considering applying and reapplying. I know you've all received the borough president's email about it, but looking at it from our perspective, it's about it's an opportunity for our committees to consider what sort of talent you may be hoping to add that you may feel are lacking, or in fact, because we are heading into sort of this will be our last cycle before term limits. There may be people that you will lose that you want to sort of, at least in terms of a skill set, replace. So please give that a consideration, reach out to folks in the community, and also just let me know if you're looking for certain types of talent and skill set, because I can relay that to the borough president's office. I will not have access to the applications, but I can let them know certain things would be a particular help.
Oh, I have an opinion about that.
Oh, well.
Not for this month.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I do in the middle of the report.
As I said, and just to let you know, we are going to get a lot of new people, at least 7. We unfortunately are down to 43 members, wow. Which is, I think, the lowest I've ever seen it in all my years on the board.
Why aren't they appointing people?
They tend to do it in clusters, and once you get close to the end of a year, they tend to push it off until the next cycle. And in fact, there are boards that are worse off than us, so that's what happens. Unfortunately, last week, Andy Diaz submitted a resignation. So that's what brought us down to 43. And at this point, I am ready. I know many of you.
When did he start?
I didn't even get to see it.
This is his first term.
Oh, okay. I've never met him.
Are you sure that's the right name?
Yeah.
He was on the landmarks.
He was on landmarks and street activities.
Okay, well.
So you may not have run into him. That's why.
Okay.
And at this point, I think I mentioned it again to the borough president's office. Michael Levine, of course, is officially now.
Oh, right.
It's been I wanted to make sure that we followed all the procedure, but so that's what brings us down to 43. It's also the beginning of the year is the time that our public members have to reapply. It's only a 1-year term. I know the office has gotten at least 2 reapplications. And certainly if you have public members, unless you object, I certainly will reapprove them. But they've got to submit the application. And if you have public members that haven't, please don't let them vote, which is actually a great way to get them to formally reapply. Another thing that will be starting this month is the election cycle. If anyone has questions about or considering running for office and would like to ask me questions, I'm happy to answer. I'm sure our other officers are the same, although I will not speak for them. And the only other thing is, it's on the agenda, which is the reso on Gansevoort Square, but I just want to personally thank Eugene and Katie, and particularly Janine, for helping to produce, a really strong resolution on such short notice. It shows just how good our people are. And we will discuss it substantively more in detail when we get to the item. So that's it for me. Oh, yes.
I feel as though in the past 3 years, we continue to see this trend of new board members appointed and then gone within the year. And so I'd really like to see some sort of like exit survey or something, but also just to have that data so that when we are in that meeting with Eric Coelho from the borough president's office, that we can say, look, the past 3 classes or cohorts that have been presented, like we've a low attrition rate for these specific reasons, and be able to attribute it to, so we can have more say, because it's
staying power.
More staying power, because that's
I think, well, I would say, and that's excellent idea, but I would say that when you tend to have people who drop off, often are the newer people. There's a disproportionate loss amongst newer people versus the veterans, because they're not aware of what the commitment is. And this is what I hear. One of the things I hear again and again, this was a lot more than I expected.
That would be good feedback for the borough president's
Yes,
office.
would, absolutely.
I was going to suggest something else for the borough president. I think that our board could really use some business owners. We're very light on business owners and property owners.
And I have asked for that.
And good. Oh, that's great.
I have specifically asked for that, specifically people who own businesses and lived in, a combination of the two, and smaller business.
Property owners?
Yes, this was definitely one of my asks.
It was very helpful when Scott was on our board and there were a lot of applications coming up for clubs. And he was just a very good perspective to have on the board, someone who didn't think that they were evil, it was just very helpful for rounding up.
Absolutely. But this is just also the kind of feedback that helps, so that when we make our ask, they can flag certain applications as having particular interest. So it's early in the year, but think about it, maybe run it by your committee members, what they think, so that we get the best results.
We have a lot more people dropping off because they haven't been involved in anything in the community before. So they come in and this is their entree into community stuff.
Yeah.
They haven't been a part of anything and then they leave. This is a very high percentage, I think, in the last 6 to 7 years versus the past of people.
That's probably true. Historically, more people had other groups that they belonged to before they came on. That is true.
We've had a lot of people who just don't show up for once or twice. And
They're not that into it.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Anybody else have something to contribute? Otherwise, I will turn it over to Mark.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. I'll try to speak over. So mostly these are updates. We're looking to send out the agendas for February's calendar either this Friday or Monday. So if you could please, especially those committees that are not application driven, please get me your agendas in time for that. I want to recap the committees from which I expect to have resolutions, not to highlight that, but to make sure I'm not missing any. So if you give a listen, I'm expecting resolutions from SLA 1 and 2, Cannabis, the Outdoor Dining Working Group, Land Use, Landmarks, Executive, possibly from tonight. So the question is any others. You don't have to answer right now, but email me if you want to make the agenda tomorrow to make sure to include you. A quick update on Airtable. We had a very productive working session today with Beta NYC, who were the folks that set it up for us in the first place. And it turns out they think that they owe us time on amounts that we've already paid them. So hooray, and we're gonna take full advantage of that. One of the things that they mentioned today was that there is an extension from a third party that you can add on to Airtable that allows a person to search not just the fields that we input into Airtable, but the actual document itself. And so that could be very helpful. One of the things that Fran and I have encountered in trying to make this work is making it work both for people in this room who are very sophisticated users and know what they're looking for, and for people in the community who may think that there might be something somewhere about this particular address.
Yeah.
And it's a tricky thing because I'm trying to serve, it's almost like you need two products, but we're gonna have one. Let me see. We have an option to make Airtable not just the spreadsheet through which you find things, but actually the repository of the documents themselves, which I understand is a great facilitator of the first thing I said about having them search the document itself. So that's the Airtable update, and we're getting a little excited about it. The rest of many of these are updates on venues, letting you know that SLA, as you may know, the church basement is going to be the subject of a gut renovation. The floor is whatever. Yeah, I've talked about that before. I'm now reasonably assured that we can have our meeting there in February. I've lined up March, April, and May at the hospital, the only other place I know of right now that doesn't have a curfew. And I'm trying to get them to extend further into the year. More on that as I succeed.
Can't you find some places with a curfew? I like a curfew.
Well, then you want to be in a public school.
Memories of being grounded, right?
There you go. Let's see. Parks and Waterfront, Rich will talk about the substance of this, but that meeting on February 5th will be at the school, the MS 323-75 Morton, because we expect a crowd. I'm also going to try to get either that location or another one in that general area for their March meeting, because apparently there's another controversial subject which maybe Rich will talk about. Let me see. I used the district service cabinet to introduce a store owner in Soho to all the parties that come to district service cabinet, because she is one of a number of businesses with the second or the 2.0 of ADA abusive lawsuits.
Oh, my dad.
These are lawsuits that are brought by somebody who has no intention of patronizing a store, simply to generate the legal fees that the ADA statute empowers. And this is brought by the same law firm that when they were bringing these lawsuits through the Brooklyn or the Eastern District Court, the judge eventually said, you can't bring any more of these lawsuits to the lawyer because it was so abusive. And by abusive, I mean they're extracting money from store owners,
Not improving.
but they're not actually changing the access to the store.
Plug a hole that my
And
dad
in the
was
worst
slapped
of all
with this. It's
possible
ridiculous.
circumstances, sometimes one plaintiff, they settle with one plaintiff only to have another plaintiff come along, because these are not class actions. So there's no
There's no remediation. There's still an opportunity to sue.
correct. And
And
Oh.
mostly they settle, by the way.
Oh, they always said that.
right, because these lawsuits are expensive, and and there's no insurance.
Just a quick
So you're saying
$2,000
the
bucks.
district services cabinet is doing what with these?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to facilitate a discussion between the bids and the elected officials about responding to these lawsuits, because there's strength in numbers, basically. So there's a store owner who's already working with everybody on her block. And we're trying to extend that to pool resources and to share knowledge, especially when it comes to settling lawsuits only to be sued
Right.
the next day by somebody else.
Also, I mean, what's upsetting to me is that, you know, if you have a violation under any other thing, the city issues you a violation. And then you either pay a fine, you correct it. This does not do that. So the property owner has no idea that this is coming.
Correct.
And it really seems like the city has a role to play in intervening here.
You're right, but it's that thing where it's city officials and federal law.
But city officials carry out federal law in approving buildings applications. No, sorry, I don't want to, you're right, I won't take.
Don't-
this
let's not go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Not with me.
Yes, Valerie.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add a few things on this. Number one, we've been told for outdoor dining that the city, by an applicant's attorney or architect, that the city is not is not responsible for like ensuring like outdoor dining is ADA compliant, which is wrong, which is completely
That
wrong.
can't be right.
And also with that, so the Economic Development Committee on this board, in its earlier identity, when I chaired that, we actually held a whole series on ADA and had a lot of those different findings. We had business owners come speak. We were trying to work with finding a congressional federal bill that we could get the congressman involved in, and as well as had ADA, like disability advocates, come and speak about the experience. But it is very true that one lawsuit you can literally get one the next hour, it doesn't matter. And we had a business owner on Houston who explained the entire process that they went through. And I believe their attorney hopped on the call as well, so.
Oh, it'd be great if there's another way for this to have legs, that's great. I'm just putting people together, but if there's other ways to respond, I'm glad to facilitate. And then just a real quick thing about public members, I did send out the actual form to all the public members I know of, but obviously there may be others that you want to retract. I think everything else.
And of course, that there is a link on our homepage at the bottom.
It is, and I updated it.
Oh, good, thank you. Okay, that was needed update.
The committee lists are out of date.
Again, already?
So I would just, if we could just like have it on a monthly basis, that checked, because like Ryder Kessler was on the landmarks committee and he's not been on that since October of 2023. So I just, so I mean, if we don't know, if all the public members we don't know of, I would hope that there's a master list that we have that has that, because if we're just relying on the website, the committee list is not accurate.
No, we are not relying on the website. Anything else, Mark?
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, so our calendar, review of the calendar, starting with February. Anybody have any issues or changes or requests regarding February?
Like we will have a second meeting probably on that Wednesday, the 26th, and I need to double check with the committee that date will work.
We will
So
pencil that in so that it gets protected, and then you can always drop it if you don't need it. Because otherwise they disappear. Okay.
Thank you.
No, nothing else on February. Anything else going forward down the road, March, April? I know it's speculative, but.
This call will be recorded for quality and training purposes. Please note, if at any point you'd like to get back to the previous call menu, press the pound key. If you know your.
That was it said Susan Wittenberg was talking.
Maybe somebody sent their AI bot.
Anyway,
Really?
didn't sound like her voice.
Okay, if there's nothing anything more on the calendars, and of course we deal with calendar as we need to.
Right. I do have, sorry, I have another question. Nope, it's been answered. Never mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
So next is the resolution on the Gansevoort Square project. I'm going to turn this over to Eugene. Would you like to discuss or
I don't know. Thank you, Susan. I'll be brief. I want to just give a little background on why we're doing this resolution through exec. So, as everyone knows, the city has been proposing a housing project on what they're calling Gansevoort Square, which is the site of the Whitney. The Whitney is going to double their building size. The High Line as well is increasing the size of their building. There is a transfer of open space and a 600-unit housing project that is being proposed, which would be a minimum of 25% affordable with a goal of 50% affordable housing by unit size. Land use had a EDC, which has been leading the project, scheduled a meeting with the leadership of CB2 on last Friday, just a few days ago, right before the weekend, and which was after
It seems like a lifetime ago.
It does seem like a while ago, but it was just a few days ago, which was unfortunately after the scheduled land use meeting, which was last Wednesday. We had been hoping for EDC to give some good news and say that they were going to, slow down the timetable, because that was one of the main concerns the community had had raised, which is that there was a lot of pressure to move this along very quickly. There was very little time to absorb all the information that was being put out by the city, particularly with the holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all of that. And we have been hoping that there would be some slowdown, maybe a few weeks, maybe a month or so, in the issuance of the RFP, which they had been shooting for January. At the top of the meeting, they told us that was not going to be the case, and they were still shooting for a January RFP. For ULURP, that's really not happening until the end of 2026, early 2027. We also learned quite a bit at that meeting, namely that the goal of 50% affordable, so if we were going to get 50% affordable housing at the site, the city's own projections said that the average weighted AMI of the people that would get the affordable housing had to be 90%. If it wasn't 90% AMI, then we were going to be limited to 25% of the affordable housing. So it really wasn't much of a discussion point. They were basically saying the higher the number of affordable units, the much higher the weighted AMI. Of the people that were going to have to get into the units. So, that's really not quite the discussion that we had been expecting. We were also told some hard numbers about the financing. By the city's own estimates, if they were going to do 100% affordable on the site, it would cost roughly $325 million additional dollars, in addition to the city having to go through what's called open shop construction. But the number $325 million, compared to the city's budget for affordable housing or the city's budget in general, is not a huge number. But that's the price the city's put on putting in 100% affordable housing. Now, the city's argument is that they're going to reserve affordable housing, 100% projects for those areas that, quote unquote, really need it, which are going to be in the outer boroughs, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens. But the message was that any housing project in Manhattan really should be able to do a cross-subsidy model, and it's not going to get the full 100% affordable. And this is all, very new information. This is information that they didn't tell us when they came before land use in December. We also found out some other things, like the site plan that they were planning is using some old figures for how much setback they need between the buildings. Because of that, we decided that the best course of action was for us to put together a resolution, which has been distributed to the executive committee. We're looking for the executive committee to pass this resolution. Since the land use committee's already met this month. And for us to wait in February would really disadvantage us, because that's going to be after the RFP is now issued. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to read through the resolution. I will, leave it open for, Katie or for Janine to jump in about some of the points on the resolution, or if there are any specific questions from the committee. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
So the resolution, no,
No.
everybody has copies. It's not like graphics where you can do it.
Yeah.
Susanna.
My question is, like, if this project gets killed, let's say that our resolution carries the day and this project gets killed, then what happens?
Well, the city land's not going anywhere. The city land is still going to stay there.
And what is the action that the ULURP requires? It's a change in use? What is it?
The
Or change
ULURP
in
will be
occupancy?
it will be a single action that affects all of the buildings on that lot. So
Yeah.
it would first, it would allow for a residential building, because right now it's zoned manufacturing.
Got it.
It would also raise, I'm assuming, the FAR, because they are planning on putting in a 60-story building.
Yeah, which seems out of scale. Okay.
And also, I believe that they would look to change it so that they could build something other than a food service
Right, so change
exchange,
the-
which I think is one of the stipulations on the land.
Right, okay, thank you.
Shirley has her hand up.
Yes, a simple question. I had thought that EDC stood for Economic Development Corporation, and you have authority. Have they changed into an authority?
Oh, you're right. It is Economic Development Corporation.
What did you write?
The grammatical.
No, okay. Does it say Empire?
Oh, authority.
Another question about the open shop. Does that refer to
It's
use-
CBs.
No, you're correct. Thank you.
You are correct. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just about open shop, I just had a question. What is it? Does it refer to unions?
I believe it refers to unions. Yes,
It doesn't require union labor.
that's right.
You can, the developer has an option of how they want to source the labor.
And that's why we hyperlinked it, because we thought other people might have that question.
Yeah, so that might be something. to
Well, because the RFP as it stands now calls for labor at a certain,
Yes, it does.
salary.
That was one of the things that they put in there. Yes, Emma.
I can also ask what is potentially an ignorant question, but I don't understand, what is the incentive to have the RFP so far ahead of the ULO? Like, what is the, like, what is the,
That's how the
reason
city
to do that?
always does it, because
Okay. but especially on this particularly like
it's always
contracted?
because they select a developer and then the developer pays for the process of the ULR.
Yeah,
It's their project, and the developer will put in they're not gonna get they're gonna get a whole bunch of different proposals,
Yep.
and they're gonna pick one, and those heights and densities and so forth will drive what goes into the ULR.
that makes sense, but I guess I'm trying to understand why the rush.
Probably because,
And like, what is the advantage of
it's probably
having all that
because
additional
April
time?
11th is when, Mayor Adams is due in court. Of course, nobody said that. And if you look at
That's
the
helpful.
ROFO documents from 2009,
Yeah.
I haven't poured through it, but everywhere, it has basically all these deadlines. You have like 500 days to do this.
But it's
this,
not
but-
just about the process itself. There is a
But it's-
larger picture here.
Yeah, but at the
Thank
end of the day, the city can extend any of these deadlines.
Okay,
That being said, there is a 10% deposit that the Whitney will pay based on this document, so we don't really know what it's, how it is. And the city is gonna use that money to basically
Go up.
the meat market folks.
Right.
I see.
So
Okay.
they're using this as an incentive to push it through, not that there's not other city money to reallocate the meat
right,
market folks, but
Okay,
those are probably the drivers, politics
thank you.
and money.
thank you.
I mean.
This was from 2008, 2009, like this process, and this was to encourage the Whitney to move downtown from an underused area. And they were going through this process of, they were trying to do an expansion uptown that didn't work. They were thinking about keeping boat spaces. But they came down, and that was considered a very good step under that mayoral administration to an area that had some wanted to have some more stuff, bring some cultural institutions downstairs, so it was very positive. But in the intervening time, the city's priorities have changed dramatically, and that we have a housing crisis. And so somehow this housing got tacked on to the edge to kind of address that. But a big part of that footprint is still a cultural institution as a standalone building. And we were told that these uses all have to be separated on the lot in order for any of them to move forward, because it didn't seem that it was realistic for people to work together. And it's a little loose what I'm saying, but that's why this is all separated. And so that's why we have a 6th-story building instead of maybe a better design use of what's publicly owned land. But the right of first refusal is to the Whitney. And so they're the ones in the document, and they are pitching this as they gave up this percentage for housing. But nobody's really revisioning this, maybe under that change in time. And I think that that's what we discussed at the full board meeting, that this doesn't seem quite like a great revisiting of this project for what the priorities are. And it's not about not the Whitney, it's about how could this maybe be done a little bit better? And that's what people were a little bit frustrated about.
Sorry, I want to call on Rich, who's got his hand up. Please, Rich.
Yeah, I'm just trying to visualize the
Rich.
solution here. Are we talking about are we talking about having a greater percentage of the footprint, 1,000 units, and much lower than 60 feet building? Is that the objective?
So there's 4 objectives. I mean, the first is that we want a greater percentage of affordable housing. They're promising the 25.
Yes.
The goal 50. You know, we're saying it's city on land. We should be talking 100.
Free land.
We're also saying that the city should, if they're talking about, you know, they're saying that there's limited money available from HPD. We're saying, have they looked into federal and state subsidies as well? And it doesn't look like they have. And there's a document that we've circulated within the committee. I'm happy to circulate it to exec as well of city and state sources of funding for affordable housing. We're also saying that the site plan they have is outdated. The city of Yes, which was passed last year, has already made that 30-foot setback that they're putting in the site plan obsolete. So right away, it's not an optimal use of the footprint. And because of that, we're also saying, you know, can they look at other creative uses to maximize the housing on the site? You know, they've kind of divvied up the site in a very elementary manner, like 10,000 square feet for housing and so on.
Open space.
You know, is there open space that's, you know, there's open space that's larger than the footprint they have for the housing, you know, and which is going to serve as like another entryway to the Whitney. You know, it's a lot of space for the Whitney, not a lot of space for housing. I also want to say we should probably add developing 100% permanently affordable housing in the first, therefore be it resolved. Since the city also has not said that it's going to be permanent. I don't think they've given us that.
25% would be permanent.
Yeah.
It's permanent? Okay, sorry.
Yeah. But that's just the 25%.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Frederica.
Yeah, hi. Susanna, the only thing that's going to kill this project is if the RFP is so poor that nobody bites, no developers come along. Otherwise, they think they have a solid plan. I feel that's the Whitney that's really the bottleneck of the whole project. The Whitney has control over the entire site. They've decided that they want to have a horizontal expansion. They don't want to go up very much. They want to go out towards Little West 12th. And that is putting all the pressure on the residential site. So for us to focus on the difference between the 20-foot setback and the 30-foot setback is, I think we're missing an opportunity to press the Whitney further to redesign the building so that 1, there's more open space, and 2, there's a larger footprint for the residential building.
Not more open space. Not more open space.
No, can you imagine that entire site covered with either the Whitney or the residential or the High Line and no open space?
It is now. It is now. There's a park across the street.
That's not the point. We're not talking about where people can go to recreate or recreate. We're talking about how the area is going to look. The Whitney wants the open space. They want to program it and they want to create a new front door for themselves. So they are committed to some open space. I really appreciate all the work that went into this so quickly, but I feel that unless we ask the Whitney to look at a different design that goes up a little higher and takes up a little bit less space, I think that we're disadvantaging ourselves.
We are doing that in number 4.
Right. And I will tell you, they you know.
What is number 4? I mean,
Therefore be it resolved, number 4.
Right.
Could you just read it?
Yeah, investigating other options such as cantilever construction and or the creation of mixed-use buildings combining housing with the museum spaces and office uses sought by the Whitney and the Friends of the High Line to maximize housing.
Thanks, but are you still including the part about the difference between the 20-foot setback and the 30-foot setback?
That's the
That's number
third.
3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
really,
the-
if it were up to me, I would take that out because I think that weakens our position. We don't really want another 10 feet. We want them to look at a different expansion. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Eugene, did the discussion or the resolutions, it seems like number 4 might touch upon the fact that the High Line does not seem to be the entity that got the priority in 2008 for this land. And yet there's a big chunk that's allotted to the High Line. That seems to be such a small part of the whole picture. They could expand their office space in a building that is also built on that portion of the land that's now allotted to the High Line. Also, the housing above any of these cultural institutions, like look at what MoMA did. Or there's probably many other examples of that where the cultural facility gets the primary storefront and all of that accessibility space, and then housing above it.
Right. That's a good point. And I think that's what number 4, the fourth therefore be resolved is trying to articulate is that, that kind of like stacked construction, what we're calling mixed use, where they mix the spaces and, what they've done on the site is not that. What they've done is they've just drawn a line and said, this piece is for housing, everything west of this line is for the Whitney, and nothing is mixing together. And it's not an optimal use, I think, of a very small site.
Great, good, thanks.
And some, just to put in perspective, and, building heights in numbers of feet is different than stories, but the 60 stories is taller than the tallest building in Hudson Yards, story-wise, like to just put how extreme this is. And so the idea is that not necessarily that there be less bulk, but it be reconfigured and brought down by better utilizing the full square footage of the site to attain that same amount. And I think that's, even if it were 40 stories, it's still insanely high, from the sky. I'm looking at a Google Earth, just, looking at what this height is, and it's
like
huge.
wrong with 20 feet, like something that's big,
It's ridiculous.
big, but it's not 60.
Right, and the idea, I think, is that they want some hyper luxury, in a very skinny tower, and somehow have what it ends up being a token amount of affordable housing for that extreme upside. And that's on free land.
The only way you can justify building to that height, because of the requirements, is to put in ultra luxury housing, because the cost per floor has gotten so prohibitive that's the only thing that makes sense there. And it does raise the question, if you can get if EDC can say, well, we can get so much per a luxury unit, why should we have, I don't want to see them turn around and say, do we really need, is this the best place for affordable housing? Maybe we should take the revenues we generate and spend the money for affordable housing in another location.
Offsite, right.
Offsite. I'm sorry, but didn't that happen to Google headquarters?
Well, except there is no offsite.
There was no offsite. The deal changes. So we've been through that. So
Also, it's city-owned land. Even the Google was a private development. This is city-owned land, period. So the cost of acquisition, no matter where it is in the city, is equal. So the building cost shouldn't, maybe a little, but it shouldn't be tremendous.
And we deal with less transparency because it's EDC and not HPD.
And a big thing, part of this is that the city's priorities have changed in this intervening time period significantly. And we can have a multitude of uses on the same space, you know, at different heights.
Rich has his hand up, please.
Yeah, I'm just curious of how does the developer make a margin on this?
They do a 99-year lease to the city, and I guess that's part of, I mean, this is what the RFP is about, and in return, they agreed to, you know, build the building, and they get the rent from the market rate units, and they get the property for essentially free, most likely. I mean, it's.
There's also a tax abatement. So the program they're building in under 450, I mean, they're gonna get a property tax abatement.
But if it's all affordable.
But if it were 100% affordable, it wouldn't be a 458 project. It would be a
No,
different
it's
project.
485X.
485X project.
25%.
Right.
And then the rest would have to be through different subsidies. And that's where the city's presentation that's linked, they said it takes another 325 million, which sounds like a big number around this table, but for New York City, that's not a big number.
Well, also that's if you're building a 60-story building. I just, you know,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
what's
right.
I just don't
less.
understand. So if you were not cross subsidizing and you were not building a 60-story building, but a 20-story building, and you were giving it to the developer for free, I mean, I don't know the math, obviously, but it does raise questions to me of.
Yeah, that was what I was trying to get.
Balance where a developer could make their money back by just having, you know, a fixed rent that is known in advance, and they have free property, you know, the property is free, and then they're getting a return on investment on the cost of the development. All right, sorry.
So to answer your question and also Rich's question, I mean, the city has told us in no uncertain terms that the height is by design. You know, they are hoping that the luxurious units that they're going to have all the way at the top, that rent is going to subsidize the affordable housing that they're going to build. So that's how they're planning on making the math work, is that it has to be so tall because they expect the hyper tall units to be generating a large amount of the rent.
But you don't need to build 60 stories for 25%, you know, cross subsidization. It just seems, you know, kind of out of whack.
Yeah, we don't have access to, there's no numbers for us to look at, and we'll never get that.
Yeah, they've done, I think they've done financial studies, but they haven't shared.
Yeah,
We never share those.
we've been to, yes, Katie.
Just to this point about the height, they also are talking about it as a spire. This is my first point, as a spire that will cast fewer shadows or have a less shadow impact. So they're, you know, rationalizing it to us in this manner. But I also want to point out that they have apparently been talking about this for 5 years, interrupted by the pandemic, and then maybe 2 years ago they got back to it, and they've been intensively discussing it for a year. We probably reported to you earlier, but I think it's good to keep in mind that they have hired a design consultant and worked with that design consultant for close to a year from what we can figure out. And you know, they're working with the stakeholders, but we are never considered a stakeholder. And you know, that's you know, that's given the people who've met with them pause that we're not considered stakeholders.
I just wish I understood, you know, Andrew Kimball is a really good guy, and his heart is in the right place. You know, he's a committed public, he's a committed guy. And so I would just love to know what his thinking is, because I know that he wants public benefit.
He probably inherited this.
Yeah, and he wants to make his boss happy.
If you go back to the New York Times articles from the early 2000s, mid 2000s, I think it's the New York Times, they outlined some of the, I forget all the minutia of the details, but it was the expansion of the Whitney and needing more space,
Right.
being uptown. The community was fighting back against some of the expansion. Then there were questions about whether they could afford to have two different spaces. There's a lot more history. And I think that this was a part of justification of moving downtown, but things have changed since then.
Great, thanks.
Katie, your hand is still up or something else?
Yes, it's up again. I just want to respond to Susanna's question. It's pretty clear from the meetings that this is really being driven out of the mayor's office more, that's a very, they're a key player, a key decision maker here. And so, Andrew is, he's fine, but he's not in a decision, he's not at the top level of the decision making, no matter what his.
The call was driven by the guy from the mayor's office.
The chief of staff.
The chief of staff. So he did all the talking, or 99%, other than trying to suck up time with stakeholders.
Frederica?
Can we hear if Eric has been involved in these talks and what his position is, and also any other electeds that might be involved?
Well, we had at the meeting, Eric was there, Deborah Glick was there, and Brad was there as well.
And representatives from Goldman's office, several.
Correct.
And the borough president as well.
Yeah,
The borough president's office.
that's true. They had a earlier meeting with these, with EDC and the city hall without us. This was sort of this second meeting sort of was there to explain.
Token meeting?
Yeah, to explain things to us. I felt that the response from the electeds, yes, they talked about wanting to slow down the RFP timeline, but there was a kind of a tempered tone from them. I don't know. I feel like we don't have the whole picture.
Yeah, I would just add that apparently the electeds had a similar meeting a week before without community board too. So everything was really focused on responding to our resolution, and it wasn't.
Don't you feel that the leadership of CB2 should meet with Eric and actually try to get him to be an ally with the community board? I know that he's big on shredding and, vaccinations, but he's got to really step up on this.
I think that's something that can happen. That's separate from the resolution.
Of course, but we're having a conversation about the immediacy of them moving forward. I think, he's important to know that he represents us.
Right. Well, it's what's I think is possible from Eric. And yes, we keep talking to him. And right now he keeps going back to the timeline of the RFP. I don't feel like he's really focusing on some of the other things. And I don't know that he's prepared to sort of dredge up, when we talked about, the site plan and the fact that this is not an effective use, the response was it's not open for discussion. And if we were to open it, basically it's going to bring down the whole deal. This is such a well-constructed deal. All the pieces fit together. And here you are trying to, destroy it. Mm-hmm. And what they've done in a sense is pit us against the other stakeholders. Well, we're not a stakeholder, but you have the Whitney is on board, and the Highline is on board, and the Meatpacking Co-op is on board, and we are.
And you're right, and we're the rub. Okay.
Yeah. But do we care? Like if the deal dies, whatever. Like
it's not going to
die. We shouldn't be afraid of that.
The point is that they're kind of like, this is a tentative deal, and if the deal could die, if you guys oppose this. Well, if the deal dies, what happens? Like that was my question at the beginning.
It was like back to the table. You get a better deal. I mean, exactly. Yes, I'm sorry, Brian.
Yeah, well, it's not a good deal. It's not a good plan. It's bad in so many ways, and that's why we have a very good resolution here. And a point of clarification, we're talking about focusing on Eric Botcher as opposed to Eric Adams in these conversations about she should get involved, or was he at the meeting? And all of these references to an Eric is not very clear if we don't have last names.
Oh, she meant Eric Botcher.
Yeah. I don't think Mr. Adams is going to take our call.
And generally, just in fairness, our elected officials generally won't take a position until the board has voted on or passed a resolution. And even in the beginning phases. So, they rely on this level of discussion to occur with the community board. So we can engage with them, but we need to be fair with.
There's also no city council
When-
vote. I mean, you he'll represent us, but if this, I mean, what's he supposed to, he has no official role.
I mean, this is essentially tweaking an old 2008 deal, right? And the city's changed a lot instead of revisiting it. And that's even the last 5 years. And, we are growing exponentially or at a significant rate, and we're not revisiting that.
Well, actually, I have,
Sorry.
first I'm going to call on Chenault because he has not participated yet. Well, you're muted.
Were you calling on me?
Yes, I am.
I just wanted to speak a little about the landmarks ramifications, understanding this is not in the district. Somebody spoke about the virtues of a high building, what they think is, and also the use of the plot in general. From the landmarks point of view, in the way that it affects the Gansevoort district, I think we would prefer whatever amount of housing there is, that it's flattened out. So basically part of the volume is on top of the Whitney extension and the whole thing is less tall.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that does about the shadow and so forth, but that's what would have the least impact.
Right, thank you. Eugene?
Sure. I just wanted to also add on about the electeds. We have been meeting with, the electeds as well as officials, their representatives. But I also wanted to point out that Assembly Member Glick's office did send a letter in regarding this prior to their meeting, that they had the Friday before they met with us. But she had some very specific asks in her letter, specifically saying, she didn't want the city to consider the 120% AMI level when apportioning out the affordable housing. So, she has been, Glick has been very involved in this as well.
Anyone else? If not, is there if there's no objection to voting, we will, yes, Brian.
Just asking if the item number 1 and the whereas, yes, there are 4s. We are amending it, Eugene, to developing 100% permanent affordable housing?
Yes, yes. So it would now read, let me find it, developing 100% permanent affordable housing. So just the addition of the word permanent.
Thank you.
And I also think we should add a clause at the end of 4, such as the Museum of Modern Arts announced expansion in 2007 that opened in 2019, and link to that information.
Yeah. I was also going to ask from this conversation, we talked about investigating different site plans in order to also reduce the height. Is that something that you want to be explicit about, or is it just?
I think that's really important.
Okay.
Our other resolution, did our other resolution mention?
That was the sentiment in the conversations in our committee. We did talk a lot about that.
But in the December resolution, it did not make it in. So, just to be consistent with the December.
But in January, it did it not?
There is no, there's only one resolution that we passed.
I know, but we've had meetings and discussions, right? Think about the input that we can provide from our January meeting to this resolution.
Well, not every, that is a land use, that was something discussed at a different meeting.
But Eugene, this is a land use resolution. I believe even Susan Wittenberg mentioned also that we had done a lot of talk about that.
Also for obviously whatever is most appropriate for the setting, it just seems like in the context of this conversation, there was a little bit of a back and forth about revisiting the plan for the purpose of taking down height.
I mean, I think our, you know, if we are allowed to revisit the plan, then I think that, you know, that would leave us open to saying we would want something shorter or to spread it out, like Chenault was saying, across the different,
Or at least to look at the
Right,
options.
can you see
Right.
Susan?
Right, the
in her
options. Yeah.
Chat? Can you see Susan in the chat there?
No. Since in the interest of time, since we're going to vote on this as a full board on Thursday, can we vote on the essential format of this resolution now and then allow additional tweaks before it's formally presented?
You can always do that. I mean, this is a resolution that's only coming out of a committee. It is always open for discussion.
But you know that is super messy compared to something coming out of exec that's been approved by exec, right?
No, I'm just saying that, is it possible for us at executive committee to approve the framework of this and approve what we anticipate is going to be the final language?
We don't approve a framework. We have to approve an actual resolution.
Specific.
It doesn't have to be what ultimately the board will then decide on. The question is, this is a request for an amendment. Do we have support for this amendment?
This is a new resolution presented at executive committee. The resolution is from the executive committee.
Yeah. Well, is there an executive committee member who is proposing this amendment?
Yes,
which is not.
It's not an amendment, it's a new.
Well,
No.
it's Eugene should feel comfortable or not comfortable with it. It's up to Eugene, I would think, and tangentially Katie. They were at the meeting.
yeah, I mean, the reason I'm hesitating is because there's nothing to stop us from putting it in later. And it just hadn't, in my mind, it hadn't been a
Eugene,
huge topic.
this is to affect the RFP. Now is the time to make our asks. You have a very strong resolution, but it winds up talking about 10 feet. I think we can do better than that. And I don't think that if we continue to rate those down on them, that they're going to pay attention to them. So this is our moment.
So you're suggesting to add on as part of would it be in the fourth?
I
Therefore
don't
be
have it in
resolved?
front of me because I've been traveling, but you know it very well. And you were there at the meeting, and I don't think it's, we talked about the Whitney having less horizontal, more vertical, and seating more ground to the residential.
I think Frederica is a good point here, because the 4 asks, that's right. We don't say what we were talking about.
No.
That it's significantly too tall and it should be spread out over the whole.
But wait a second, if that's resolved by a very simple, to maximize housing and reduce height. How about that?
Yeah, I think we can do that, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Okay, can we do that?
Didn't we pass at the last, I didn't go back to look at the resolution, but didn't we say use the full footprint by building housing over the museum, right?
I don't know, but
Everybody
what we
seems
didn't do
to
is
be
we didn't-
saying that, and why wouldn't we say that?
But they didn't want to do
That's what
that, and I think that's a little prescriptive. We don't want to design the building.
we don't want to do
If we
that.
want to achieve our objective.
Which is why it says investigate other options.
Right.
And that
Well,
is
but let's
not.
be more specific about the options, because everybody is just caving in front of the Whitney, and the Whitney is hogging the site.
Well, wait a minute.
Hold on,
So
let's-
if we add in the phrase maximize housing and reduce height, wouldn't give what you're
I'll
asking
read
for,
it to you.
Frederica?
I mean, because I think what you're describing is actually in the resolution, which you said you don't have in front of you, so I'll just read it. Investigating other options such as cantilever construction and or the creation of mixed-use buildings, combining housing with the museum spaces and office uses sought by the Whitney and the Friends of the High Line. Now would say to maximize housing and reduce height. I think that's pretty flexible, makes it clear what our objectives are, housing and height, and just suggest some ways without being prescriptive.
Right,
Without
but
being
who's
prescriptive,
cantilevering? Let's just, I think you're right. I think we're moving toward a better thing, but let's just not be afraid to be a little more specific.
We don't want to prescribe the design of the building.
Exactly, exactly.
So, you know,
I think.
Such
we're
as,
being
saying such
explicit,
as.
Though, in saying.
Such as, we're not designing it.
We're not
No,
designing.
nobody's suggesting designing the building, but in order to significantly reduce the height and allow the Whitney to achieve their objectives, the only way is to combine them.
That's not our job. Our job is just to emphasize that our interest here is to maximize housing and reduce height. I think that's enough.
I think that's enough too.
I do.
Well,
And
Exec members-
Eugene, you're the author. Would you accept that amendment? Or I think you have already, haven't you?
Yes, I think that would be, a fine addition to that, right? So as Susan read, and I'm going to put it into the text, into the chat.
Thank you. Thank you.
But let me just ask if the result of that is instead of 60 stories, 6 stories, because they utilize a little bit more of this open space. Is that?
That's a discussion for down the road. We're not there yet. We're not looking at.
Well, no, this is the RFP of creating the framework of what somebody bids on, and that's what we're trying to.
But we don't want to prescribe a certain number of stories. I don't think.
I understand, but what I'm saying though is if the footprint of the Whitney remains unchanged, there's no other way to do that.
Right.
Like that, the
That's
whole
true.
point is that everybody keeps having the issue with is the
You have to
standalone
be,
building for the.
there are multiple variables and you have to be willing to change the variables.
And nobody is.
To get the
So how would
optimal
that change the
result.
wording of
Meaning,
this?
I'm not sure anybody here would necessarily object if the Whitney took the full footprint and there was housing above it. The Whitney can get more of what they want of their wide open floor plates.
Exactly, and then they're not having to raise so much money.
But how would you change the wording of this resolution?
All right. Well,
You
here-
wouldn't.
You
Here's
just
the-
leave it. Let's vote on it.
I don't think, I mean,
Okay.
maybe I'm wrong, but I think that is what the
Let's
language
vote
actually
on it.
says.
Well, here's an idea, as a member of the Landmarks Committee. One of the things that we would want to see is that this new building does not exceed the maximum height of the neighborhood buildings, any neighboring buildings. or
I don't
adjacent
think,
buildings.
you know what, I don't think we should be making those kinds, I mean, we haven't had a public discussion about that. It just, let's just express our interests, which is to reduce height and to maximize housing. And
Well,
just-
then I think that we should put something in there about the historic district and being compatible with it.
Well, or to at least
That is so out the window. Brian, sorry to say. They
Why,
have.
why is that? What's out the window?
The
What does that mean?
EDC I'm not saying, I agree with you, but the EDC is so not there.
The what?
The EDC has is not.
It's not
They are
relevant.
not, they are not a
They're
partner.
not.
They are not a partner in contextuality.
I'd love to vote on
It's
this.
not a historic district.
Move on.
No.
So
it's
I
actually-
think so if everyone is fine with the addition to therefore be it resolved 4, I think that adds in our feelings about the height. It doesn't back us into a corner, and I think we have room to add on to this as we get more public discussions under our belt.
Wouldn't doesn't number 3 stand in conflict to number 4? Because number 3 suggests that it is 2 buildings. And that's kind of, that space is the space to get more for less bulk.
Maybe the issue is the fact that recognition of that it only needs to be 20 demonstrates that this is an out-of-date plan.
I think I would just take that out, you know, I take your point, Carter, and it gives them an out. They could say, well, we're not going to ask the Whitney to revise their site plan. We're just going to give you the 10 feet. And that's really, we shouldn't be content with that. So just remove that.
Or what we do is put number 3 into number 4.
No,
So-
I would leave it out because you know how you're always saying how we're negotiating against ourselves? That's an example of that.
Yes, Katie.
We have to.
Katie, your hand is up? I can't hear you.
Okay, I have to unmute the right device. The thing about the 20 feet shows that it's out of date. And I think it reflects them, and it sort of ties into the fact they've been talking about this for so long, haven't included us, and they aren't up to date on all of the resources. It's not just the 20 feet; it's all the billions of dollars that have been put forward for affordable housing in the last month or two. You know, every day there's another bit in the pot. So, and if we're going to say maximize housing and reduce height, I don't want to say, I know we say affordable housing somewhere else, but I think I would like to say maximize affordable housing, because I don't want, and Susan Wittenberg put this in the chat, we don't want to wind up with a 30-foot building that's only luxury, which.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's great.
Janine?
I could be comfortable getting rid of 3 and number 9 where 3 in the therefore be it resolved if in number 9, we add something, the reduction of the rear yard provides, let me tweak it because it's ending in it's not, well, the reduction of the rear yard to 20 feet provides an opportunity to increase the size of the housing footprint on the Gansevoort site and demonstrates how out of date the Gansevoort square plan is, or
And you put that in the whereases, right?
Exactly, number 9.
That's great. That sounds great. That's great.
That is
Okay.
excusing relying
So that now it really fits.
out of date and relying on out of date.
Yeah.
Can we vote?
If there's nothing else, I will take a vote on this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions or refusals? Thank you very much. Passes unanimous.
I have a favor to ask, since I have to be somewhere at 8 o'clock. Can I give my report first, which is really, really
Your number,
fast?
go ahead.
We didn't have a meeting in December. We have one next week. And the subject will be the proposal to build a shelter for women on West 11th Street between 5th and 6th, and to be operated by Project Renewal. That is the end of my report.
That's the one that's been in lawsuits forever?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Same one we've already
Okay.
signed up.
We signed off on it. We are not required to write a resolution about a shelter. I would like not to, actually, if I could help it. We did the last time because there was such an unexpected outpouring of support, and we are a rich neighborhood with no shelters. So I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to express that we do care about this, but I don't see any particular need to write a resolution. We'll see how the meeting goes.
That's great.
Susanna, could I ask you a question? Is there going to be an opportunity for public participation? Is it an asterisk event or what?
It's a public meeting. Yeah.
It is a public meeting. Okay.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Public meeting.
Absolutely. Nothing else on human services than cannabis.
That's
This month we had 3 agenda items. One was a proposed new dispensary on Christopher Street between Bleecker and Bedford. We decided to withdraw to give us a chance to really talk to the neighbors. He doesn't even live in New York. And then we had 2 renewals. We actually made history again.
Wow.
Community Board 2 made history again.
Wow.
We actually approved the first 2 cannabis license renewals in the state of New York. For the first 2 dispensaries in the state of New York, which we also did. And we're struggling with really how to set up the process, right? Because we've been able to be trailblazers in so much of this cannabis stuff, which is so cool. So for this first renewal, we wanted to really be informed by the operators. What have they seen? What are the challenges? I mean, of course, the typical stuff like have there been any violations? Have there been, any complaints? How are you working with the neighborhood and the community? But also, what is it that you need us to uplift for you? Is there something that the state needs to know that is community-based or operations-based that you don't feel like you have another outlet, right? And so we were able to do that, and we heard really amazing things from Housing Works, and we heard really amazing things from SMAC. And I think it's going to be great to be able to really tell the whole story of the last 2 years in these renewal resolutions.
How much revenue are they making from it?
Yeah, they're doing well.
And where's that money going?
So Housing Works is doing well. SMAC is not doing so well. If you pay attention to the news at all or read anything about cannabis, they are having some really serious struggles. Based on the fact that they took the state's social equity fund deal, which was tied to DASNY, and the whole thing turned out to be a mess. And there are going to be some lawsuits for sure. I mean, there's, I think, 21 of these sites, I think, statewide. And, you know, the ones that are doing well are the ones whose loans aren't getting called in. And it's like anything else, you know, and the ones whose loans aren't getting called in, there's some question as to whether they are really social equity, because, you know, the actual owners of these businesses have several other businesses out of state and have been in cannabis for a long time. So it'll be interesting to tell that story. Anyway, and we have Union Square coming for their renewal on February 10th. And we also have Curaleaf, which is the biggest cannabis medical
In America.
cannabis in the country, and actually it's a worldwide company, and
Worth $1 billion.
$2 billion.
$2 billion.
Wow.
And then we also have a dispensary proposition, proposed dispensary on East 11th Street between Broadway and University, which is prox blocked by both Housing Works and Travel Agency. They will probably have something to say about that. But we're going to take a PCA statement, which, you know, is like a 500-foot statement. We already have one from Curaleaf, which is also about 500 feet with 2 other dispensaries. And that's what we have.
Thank you.
It'll be an interesting.
Any questions about cannabis? Then we're back to land use, Eugene.
Oh, okay. You guys miss me?
Yeah. Can't get enough.
All right, so there's, in our regular land use meeting, we had 4 items, 2 of which had a resolution. The first was for 246 Spring Street, which is the site of the Dominic Hotel, previously known as the Trump Soho. They had, again, a application to put a public cafe on their public plaza that they were granted when they originally got the extra height for the hotel. So as happened last time when they came before us, we again are going to reject the application for the same reasons that we rejected it previously 3 years ago, but additionally saying that post-pandemic, we have an additional appreciation for public spaces, and again, have a big problem with a property basically reneging on their giving a public space bonus in return for additional height on their tower. The vote for that was 9 in favor and 1 abstention. The second item was for 214, 218 West Houston Street, which is the, what is the official name? But it is the residential healthcare facility, the Village.
Village Care.
Village Care, thank you. Many people came in support of this. They are taking over an additional building, 58 Downing Street, and we'll be doing basically a renovation of it where they're keeping the facade but adding additional floors to it. As part of this, they're going to be adding 20 new beds, supporting 20 beds in the facility, which we thought was a great community benefit, particularly seeing as there are very few rehabilitation centers in the village and in our district. So we had a vote, 9 yes and 1 no. So those are the 2 items with resolutions. Any questions?
Thank you, Eugene.
This said the district that it will come to landmarks.
Is this in?
I don't think it's in a landmark
No, it's
district,
not in
Chenault.
the dis- No.
It's not, okay.
Yeah, it's not.
But next, landmarks is next on our agenda, so go ahead, Chenault.
We have only one resolution out of many that's worth note, is the Moneta Garage on 3rd Street. the principal facades there. It's a building that is in historic condition, though it's been altered. It was altered from horses to cars, and is quite distinguished and resembles the one on 10th Street near 7th Avenue South. And then behind it was an addition that was a parking for the carriage, apparently. The carriage, there are two carriage entrances for it. They've been combined into a garage for a long while. The proposal is for downstairs retail on 3rd Street, upstairs dwellings, including a 2-story penthouse addition that is wildly visible, and to slice the back off of the building to make a courtyard, and then use the Minetta Street carriage building as further dwellings. The resolution is basically disapproving of wrecking the ground floor of historic distinction on 3rd Street and denying the visibility of the 2-story penthouse, and some modifications on the Minetta Street side to make it more in keeping with that very particular place where Minetta Street and Minetta Lane make a T, and therefore anything on top of that one is going to be visible no matter what it is. Even a railing will be visible. So it was a combination of approving the general with the ground floor on 3rd Street, the addition, and certain Minetta Street things recommended.
Thank you. Any questions or about landmarks this month? Thank you, Chenault. Outdoor dining.
Sure. Thank you very much. Just 1 second. Great. So the outdoor dining working group, we met on Monday, December 23rd, and we also met on Tuesday, January 14th. We have a great team behind this. I'm just going to talk about 2 trends from my report this month. NYC DOT is starting to change the definitions of certain items that are outlined in the rules that are impacting the quality of life in our neighborhoods. And we are working with the agency for clarification that we believe should be made public on the website. When I say website, I mean the Dining Out NYC website, and not communicated in piecemeal to applicants. Also, we have received a memo from FDNY outlining recommended parameters for issuing FDNY waivers. This is a memo between FDNY and NYC DOT. And the one specifically that I will call out is about parameters for issuing FDNY waivers for roadway cafes on streets where the 15-foot emergency lane will not be met with a roadway cafe sited on that street. And so one of the highlights from that memo that I think is important for this group is that they are saying that if there is a roadway cafe, let's say on the east and west side of the street directly across, that they are asking for a 15-foot offset. So what that means is that there would be they would be kind of in a jagged motion, and so would somehow by default result in some sort of choice or editorial choice being made as to who is the one being offset and all of that, which is interesting. So we, however, though, are seeing in our batches of referrals where we're being referred to applications that are directly across from one another. That's in not in the spirit of that. So that is public. It was from July 30th. We were having some difficulties getting it. I put in a FOIL request, which I was supposed to have heard back on beginning of January, but Mark did get a copy of it. FDNY was not wanting to share it because it's apparently being updated. And I think that that's wrong. I also don't think that there should be limits to sharing it. It's a public document that can be FOILed. So we will be putting it up on the CB2 website on the Dining Out page. That'll get updated. I just think that's important. Also, this is per local law local law 40 of 2011, that interagency MOUs, which are memos of understanding. This is a memo between two city agencies, are to be made public, and they are not public on either the FDNY website or on the DOT website, specifically addressing interagency MOUs.
Thank you. Anyone questions about outdoor dining? Okay, parks, Rich. Is not with us? Okay, well, I will come back to.
I'm here, I'm here. Sorry.
Oh.
I turned it off, yeah. Didn't meet this one. We have two big meetings in coming up. We have a meeting in February. This is a request by the Parks Department, the commissioner, to come back and tell us, to give us their explanation on the Dapolito Center. So we expect a big turnout for that. That is on the that's going to be at 75 Morton. And then hopefully everyone can attend, or anyone who's interested. We can set that up as a joint committee meeting. I think she would like it if the other committees that joined at the previous meetings were there. And then the March meeting is a new issue. I don't think we've talked about it. It covers a simmering dispute between leagues, basically Greenwich Village Little League and Downtown Little League, with Hudson River Park Trust about some indoor space that is leased in Pier 40 to a separate group, a group called P3, or Pier 40 Baseball. You may not know about it. It's been there for more than 10 years. Yeah. It's in the southwest corner of the building. They have some indoor batting cages and indoor space that, people can do, practice some skills. And the Hudson River Park Trust is the landlord, and they do not want to renew the lease to P3 because of some issues that P3 caused with some construction that wasn't requested properly. The leagues have probably done the wrong thing, but they are trying to get a big turnout for that, to show that they're disappointed in this decision. So that's not till March.
Something to look forward to. Chenault, you have your hand up.
The Parks Commissioner, I think after the original request, asked that it be a joint meeting with Landmarks, in that there had been the promise of a report to our when was it, September request for them to come to us, and Landmark has agreed to that, and if the mechanics of the board have, then that will be a joint meeting.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll put forward.
That's how it's calendared.
Except for the forum, and that will be the basis of our input. So it's basically to hear from her.
Yeah, she reached out before the tournament. She pledged to do, but then they weren't going to be ready in the early part of January, and so they asked to come in February. My guess is she's going to present some, and I haven't talked to her about the specifics, but she's going to present findings from the the probes they've done, and some estimates of the costs of trying to renovate or trying to save the building. So I have not seen anything about the report, but that's my sense of what she'll do, what she'll present, which is somewhat in keeping with some of the public statements she's made in the interviews she's done.
Anything else? I'm sorry.
Now completely in the hands, or at least our dealing with the Manhattan Commissioner, not the Parks Commissioner. Okay.
Yeah, the Parks has commissioners by borough. This is the Manhattan Borough Commissioner, but I don't know who else is involved. What other city agencies may be involved in the conversations. but the person who's being the point person for contact with us is the Manhattan Borough Parks Commissioner.
Tricia Shimamura.
Yes. Who we've known.
Okay, if there's anything else on parks or any questions from anybody, schools.
We do not meet. We're meeting this coming Monday.
Okay. We'll wait for that. SLA.
So both SLA1 and SLA2 had about 8 applications each. There was a no-show on one. They're coming back in February. They didn't realize they had to show up. SLA1, we had our first alteration to add outdoor seating. They haven't gotten approved yet for DOT, but we're encouraging people to come ahead of time just so we can start processing some of these because there's going to be a lot of them. So we're working on just a supplemental stipulation form that can be attached with the regular stipulation form and trying to waive the appearance of some of the applications if they had outdoor seating before and are agreeing to early hours or the same hours as they had before. And this one pretty much fit into that category. So we'll still hear from them when they finally get approved from DOT. But that's how that one will go. And then SLA2, 2 of the applications were simple corporate changes and 3 of the applications all had to do with the Gansevoort Hotel, various alterations and switching from the membership club to the hotel license and trying to formalize stipulations on all of that. And we'll hopefully have that done, but it goes back 20 years and everything isn't signed from 20 years ago because we weren't doing that then. So hopefully it'll work itself out. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions about SLA? Street activities. Will. Who was there? I don't know if he tried to drop off. We'll come back. Shirley, traffic.
The TNT meeting will be September 28th. There is something on the agenda, which I think is to do with something promising. I had mentioned before that state DOT is finally doing the study of the precincts of 9A from Battery Park to 59th Street that we and probably several other organizations have been asking for years. Seems to be moving ahead. They are now forming a focus group for their Transportation Partnering Committee, which is part of the planning process. We've been asked to send 2 representatives. Janine, Kylie, and Janet Liff will be representing CB2. And they'll be focusing on lots of input. So that will be discussed at the September 28th meeting. Everybody, please come or send us your ideas on what you'd like to see on 9A.
Thank you, Shirley. I don't see anybody's has questions. Is Will still on?
He's still on.
I can text.
Oh, please. Okay.
We can maybe move on.
Well, actually, we're done.
He's the last one.
He's the last one.
Just set it so we can see him, or somebody text him.
She just did. Well, let's see if there any new business, by the way, it's something to talk about.
Susan, I'll just mark, this is really for you. Can we get when the calendars are going out, listed on the calendars? The email calendar, the email.
I'm sort of waiting for the SLA dates, but we can.
Well, the SLA dates are there. My due dates and my questionnaires aren't, but my meetings are.
Right.
And people need to know the meetings about a week ahead of time. So probably I would say it would be the same schedule.
Okay.
As before.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
I just want to leave it.
Yeah.
Well, if Will doesn't show up and we have no new business, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
8:03.
Too damn cool to stay here any longer. We're just being wrapped up.
Where's the meeting Thursday? Where's the meeting on Thursday?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the meeting is at NYU in the Welcome Center, where we met, not the last time, but the meeting before
Yeah, yeah.
that, in November.
That's cool, thanks.
Yes, the west third entrance, not through the, the passageway.
Cool. I'll be back. See you then.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.